I hope you enjoyed Easter weekend with your family, celebrating Jesus and how he died for each one of us and how he rose for each one of us and he loves each one of us so much. We're starting a new series of stories and lessons for this week, and we're going to continue on talking on our theme of springtime and new life and animals and plants and many of God's wonders that he created for each one of us to enjoy. This book is called The Wonders of Nature. And who created those wonders? God the Creator. What do you see on the cover of this book? There's some signs of spring on there. That's right. Pussy willows. I love pussy willows. I have a pussy willow tree in my front yard, and it comes to life in the springtime. I saw some pussy willows on one of my walks recently. And what's this little guy right here? He's a fuzzy caterpillar. My husband loves those. And he makes sure that no one steps on one, and if he sees one when we're driving, he stops so we don't run over it. I don't know how he sees them, but he does. Those are some signs of nature, and the little girl is really studying that little fuzzy caterpillar. Let's see what other wonders of nature we find inside this book. I'd like you to listen and look for signs of spring, different seasons, and the different plants and animals we see in the different seasons, different areas of the map. We've studied the map and our globe before. Well, we know that in different places they have different temperatures and they have different animals and plants because of the temperature. I'd like you to look for desert climate and plants. I'd like you to look for jungle and rainforest plants and animals. I'd like you to listen and look for animals and plants that we might find in the Arctic where it's very cold. And I'd like you to look, of course, for things that tell us that life is coming alive again, and it's signs of spring that we're seeing all around us. All of those things you can find in this book, Wonders of Nature. Isn't it a wonder the way the woods know that spring is coming before the snow is even gone? The sleeping plants send up green shoots, and the tree buds swell and burst. Have you noticed any buds coming on the trees when you've been outside? I have. It's still kind of this weather right now. You notice that the little girl has a sweater on, maybe instead of a winter coat, but she still has her toque on. I've been going out for a lot of walks lately, and I still have to wear my toque. She doesn't have winter boots on, though. Isn't it a wonder that some seeds have wings? Don't you love those helicopter seeds that come whirling down? That makes sure they get to the ground so they can get stuck in the ground and a new tree can grow out of that tiny seed. God made it have those wings on it to make sure it gets to the ground. Some seeds have tiny silken parachutes, like the dandelions that we blow when they're all dried up and see the seeds shooting into the air. And like milkweed, when the pod bursts open and those little fluffy white parachutes come out into the air. Some seeds are hidden away inside fruit, like the apple, right in the middle. And we would know from when we went on our field trip to the orchard, if we cut the apple in half, what shape do we get in the middle where the seeds are? That's right, a star. Every seed, no matter how tiny, has a whole tiny plant inside it. Isn't that a miracle? There's a plant inside each one of those tiny seeds with food to use when it starts to grow. So the flesh around the seed that we eat on the apple is also, there's food around the seed to help it grow. Isn't it a wonder that under the sea there are beautiful, strange gardens where the flowers are animals? Sea anemones, sea lilies, sea cucumbers. I think those are the sea cucumbers. Do they look like cucumbers you find in the grocery store? And sea grapes. They're all actually animals. This is a sea anemone. This is a sea lily. It looks like it. This great big tall one here. It kind of looks like a lily at the top. This is a sea cucumber. This is a sand dollar. Those are kind of strange plant animals that we can find under the water in the sea. Sea cucumbers, sea lilies, sea grapes, they're all animals. Does it look like a garden to you? A garden under the sea? Isn't it a wonder that tiny coral animals under the sea, which never move, build great towers and whole islands from their tiny shells? So these are actually animals, coral, and they never move. They don't have legs, but they grow taller and taller, and they grow into coral towers. Isn't it a wonder that on the dry desert, some plants have thick stems in which they store water? They don't have any leaves though, but lots of prickly spines to keep the thirsty animals from eating them up. So isn't that interesting? I told you to listen for desert plants and animals, and here we are talking about the desert. And why are the plants different in the desert? That's right. So that they can store water, because there's not very much water in the desert. So when they do get some water, they have to store it inside. And those cactuses are made so they can store the water inside for a long time. And why do they have prickly stabbers on them? So that's right, so that other animals won't eat them up. And the kangaroo rat who lives on the desert never drinks water, but makes it in his body out of crisp, dry seeds. So here is the desert rat. Now that would be different than a rat that we would have here. Rats and mice here need to drink water. But because this desert rat lives in the desert, God made him special so that he makes water from the seeds that he eats, so he doesn't have to drink the water, because there isn't very much in the desert. Isn't it a wonder that the beaver can bite a young tree through in just a few minutes? He bites off the branches and he uses them to build a dam across the stream. So the last pictures we had was desert, and you can see lots of sand, some interesting plants and animals, but no water. Well, on this page, we have lots of green, grass, plants, and water, because this is a different climate or a different place on the map. And beavers, we have talked about those in class before. Do you remember what's special about their teeth? That's right. They have very long teeth in the front that never stop growing. Our teeth get to a certain length and they stop growing. But the beaver, if he didn't chaw on the wood or bite it, his teeth would never stop growing. And also, those sharp teeth help him to build dams. And in those dams, he makes his home. So he can chop those trees down almost just as well as a woodsman could chop it down with his chainsaw. And all the birds around, and the squirrels and the opossums and the deer and the moose, and also enjoy that beaver pond. So he puts a dam up that makes the water collect, and all his animal friends enjoy that pond. The deer, the moose, the bunnies, they're all friends sharing the same pond. Isn't it a wonder that in the jungles, so we've moved from the desert to an area like similar to where we live, where there's ponds and green grass, and now we're moving to the jungle. Let's find out what animals and plants live in the jungle. Isn't it a wonder that in the jungle the leaves grow so thickly overhead that some birds and animals on the ground never see the sun? So you can see there's lots of tall trees there and lots of green covering the top. So the sun does not shine through all that often. And some of those trees make a canopy over top of all the trees so that the sun does not shine through very often. And there are insects that look just like leaves. Why do you think those insects would be made to look like leaves? Is that so they can blend in and camouflage? The trees start growing high in the air on top of other trees. Can you imagine? Some trees start to grow on top of other trees, and they send spindly roots down all the way to the ground. And you can see some of those trees growing on other trees and the roots coming down. Isn't it a wonder that far up north, in the land of ice and snow, we call the Arctic, animals have winter coats of fur as white as the snow? So now we've moved to a different area on the map. We were in North America, we were in the desert, we were in the rainforest or the jungle, and now we're moving to the Arctic. So the Arctic again has different animals and plants that can survive there than we would see here. We see two different pictures of the Arctic. This is the Arctic in springtime here, or summer, and this is the Arctic in winter. Most of the time there is winter. Now, see these animals here? Here's the Arctic fox, the Arctic rabbit, and the Arctic dove, and they're white. God made them so that their skin, their fur would be white, so they could, one, stay warm, and two, blend in with the snow so their predators would not be able to eat them. Now, in the picture here where it's summertime in the Arctic, the rabbit has brown fur and the fox has brown fur. But here in the winter, the fox has white fur and the rabbit has white fur. And you can see that the children and the parent here have fur around their head as well because they have a furry jacket on. And then in the summertime, just like us, they take off their jacket and their winter boots, and they don't need to wear as many clothes to keep them warm. Their winters are much longer than the winters we have here. We think our winters are long sometimes, but their winter there is almost the whole year long. Isn't it a wonder that some birds fly thousands of miles over the ocean and land? How do they get there? How do they know how to fly across all those thousands of miles and come back to the same spot to lay their eggs? Every year. What do we call that? We talked about that when birds go from a colder climate to the warmer climate in the wintertime. Yes, that's it. Migration. So some animals stay here and hibernate, go to sleep for the winter. Some animals go to a warmer climate, and when they leave our climate to go to a warmer one, that's called migration. And there's lots of birds that migrate. But they somehow, God has put a GPS inside their brain, inside their body, that allows them to know how to fly back to the warmer spot every winter and then fly right back to where they came from, back here to the same spot to lay their eggs. God made them that way. So that's called migration. And how do salmon swim hundreds of miles to a shore and far up the rivers and over the waterfalls? There's a picture of the salmon going over the waterfall. You would think that they would come down the waterfall, but they use all their strength to jump up the waterfall. And they swim hundreds of miles to return to the same spot that they came from to lay their eggs. God made them with a special ability to be able to do that. So there's the migrating birds and the strong salmon going over top of the waterfall. Isn't it a wonder that fireflies have lights in their bodies they can flash on and off? I love going for walks in the evening in the summertime and seeing the fireflies by the side of the road with their little flashlights. And don't you love lying in bed and hearing the crickets chirp? How do they make that sound? By rubbing their wings together. So there's the picture in the summertime, and you can see that the little boy isn't wearing a sweater at all. He's in his shorts now because it's summertime. Here's the fireflies and the crickets. Often it's harder to see the crickets, but we sure can hear them. I like that sound. Do you? Some fish swim deep in the ocean and have electric lights dangling in front of them, in front of their noses as they swim, or little lights along their side. So here's the anglerfish that has almost like a flashlight that comes out of its nose, and here's the firefly fish that has lights along its side like this. And here's the lanternfish that has lights coming out from the front of its head, almost like headlights on a car. Isn't it a wonder that out in the pond, smooth, wiggly tadpoles lose their tails and grow legs and turn into frogs? We know all about that. And what family are the frogs from? Amphibians, you got it. And that fuzzy caterpillars weave silken cocoons around themselves and go to sleep. And then they wake up as pretty moths or butterflies. And that's called metamorphosis. And metamorphosis is a big word for change, a big change. So there's the caterpillar, and there's the cocoon that it weaves around itself, and there's the beautiful butterfly that comes out of the cocoon. So there's a metamorphosis that happens. It changes from a caterpillar to a beautiful butterfly or a moth. Isn't it a wonder that a little baby that couldn't talk or walk or even feed itself should grow up to be you? So that's a metamorphosis, isn't it? From a baby into a child. A baby that needs a mom and dad to do everything for it, to a boy or girl who's learning how to do so many things. And that's you. You're learning how to do so many things, and you're so smart because God gave you a brain that is so smart that can learn so many different things, and healthy bodies. And we need to use those brains and bodies to learn about the world that God made for us, and to share and be kind with other people around us, and to keep our bodies healthy by moving and helping other people. So God is a God of wonders who made so many wonderful things, including you.